How I passed the PMP exam from the first attempt, what was my strategy, why PMP exam is so difficult, and how to overcome frustration after preparation. I'll be answering all of these questions here, but if you don't want to watch the whole video, use the time codes from the description below to skip to what you exactly were looking for. Hello, this is Linuza talking project management on YouTube, and I always go straight to the point. So, why the PMP exam is so difficult and how to overcome frustration of preparation? There are several things. First of all, the exam process itself is pretty heavy to handle. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that you have to survive 200 questions of the exam, which takes 4 hours. This leaves you with 1.2 minutes per question, and if you're willing to take breaks during your exam, which please do, you have even less time. So it's overall a pretty boring experience, but don't complain to me because I passed my exam and spent those 4 hours being 7 months pregnant, and after I barely found a place as the streets of Mother Russia were covered by ice and snow and the navigation the SU center gave me sucked. This alone proves that no matter how stressed, tired or hormonal you are, you can do this. It's just a matter of knowing what to expect, preparation and repetition. Second reason is that the PMP book itself is not an easy reading, especially if you don't have that much of a project management experience yet, or English is your second language like it is for me. So people get scared just by the look of it. As a friend of mine told me recently, what kind of book is that it needs another book to be written to explain the meanings of it, referring to Rita Mulcahy's best-selling PMP exam prep. And this brings us to the third reason why PMP seems like a big deal. There is a whole industry created around the exam. People create and sell courses, cheat sheets, they write books, launch expensive exam simulation websites. This gives the PMP exam that complexity vibe. So if you're thinking of getting certified for several years now and maybe even had a few attempts to prep but got lost somewhere on the way, it's nothing to be ashamed of. That's what happened to me as well. We're all human, we all get frustrated, but all you need to do is start doing something. Anything that moves you toward the exam. Here are several thoughts that may help you stop procrastinating. Well, if you fail the exam, it's not the end of the world. It takes approximately 2 months to prepare for the exam, considering that you have limited time to study, as you probably have a full-time PM job as well. This is my biased opinion based on lessons learned that I read on the internet back in my days, so 2 months in average. If you schedule your exam in 3 months instead of 2, you get yourself some extra time to study. Consider that. So if you find yourself completely incapable a month before the exam, you can postpone it for free. I think it's about more than 30 days before the exam when it is still allowed. If you do it later, that's fine too. You'll have to pay for a rescheduling fee. But if you're having cold feet just a few days before the exam and cancel, it's not refundable. Now, let me share my experience, what worked for me, and how I was able to pass the PMP exam on first try. I'll even show you my results at the end. I started my career as a BA, business analyst, and they say there are no such thing as an ex-BA, so I did what a BA would do, studied the requirements and understood where I stand on my PMP path, meaning figured out what I have now, what I still need to learn, and what's the gap. I did invest money into my preparation by purchasing an exam simulator because I didn't want to waste money retaking the exam. And I knew that if I fail, I'll be sad, and a lot of things were happening in my life with the baby coming and etc. And I just didn't want to upset myself. So I paid for 3-month access to simulator, and I don't regret it. A lot of people who passed the exam advised me to take 4-hour exam demo first to identify that gap. This you can also do on that exam simulator, by the way, but I never did it. I tried, but since all the questions were new and I saw that I wasn't doing so well, I stopped after about 10 minutes. I was upset, a little angry at myself, and very frustrated to continue. So I researched lessons learned on internet, and as I said, I learned that it takes approximately 2 months for people to prep. That's why I went and scheduled the exam in 3 months. In advance, I also agreed on a week off with my manager right before the exam, as I knew that I'm the greatest procrastinator and I will probably have a few things to catch up before the exam. The plan was to prepare as much as I can, and if I feel like I'm completely incapable of taking the exam, to postpone it for another month for free. So I had a deadline, and I started prepping a little on weekends and during the business days when I had time. I've decided that I don't want to go through PM book reading again, and instead will do it iteratively, studying things chapter by chapter and then working on questions for the topics that I studied. So I went to LinkedIn Learning, called Linda back then, which I had free access to from my employer, somewhere and watched the PMP prep course by Sandra Mitchell. It was very general, topics were covered high level, but it was exactly what I needed to kind of build that basic roadmap in my head, and rest was basically adding things on top of that. The way it worked is that first I watched a video on something, for example, communications management. Then I went to Exam Simulator, which, by the way, allows you to choose which topics you'd like to get tested on, and I selected what I needed and did about 20 questions on it. Then I reviewed the gaps, my answers. It even had some descriptions on why my answers were not correct, if they were, and if I had those mistakes but the description just didn't make sense to me, the explanation itself, I googled and reviewed those topics in PMBOK more closely until I had that aha moment. And I did more questions on the topic. So if you are on a deadline and you have your exam very soon, maybe scheduled in 30 or even 15 days, consider this method as it's the fastest. It's sort of an agile method of preparation. You're doing it in sprints. I didn't do much of this at the beginning. I skipped many days and, as expected, left it all to the last month. But anyway, targeting the weakest spots was definitely the best solution for me, and I recommend it. There was a lot of frustration at the beginning, but once you start, it's getting better. Just keep going. Another advice is using the dump sheet. If you don't know this yet, it's when you reproduce that main table and some formulas from the PMBOK on a piece of paper that you were given at the exam itself. So by dumping all your knowledge on it, you can then focus on your exam and use it. It's a cool trick to pass any exam. Everyone does it, but I know that some people spend weeks memorizing things for the dump sheet. I have a different opinion on that. Instead, I started practicing this dump sheet just a few days before the exam and simply tried to reproduce what I already have in my head. By looking at what I have missed or misplaced in the table, I identified the areas that I don't understand that well, and I tried simply fill those gaps. For example, I remember confusing perform quality assurance and perform control processes. I remember confusing some of the formulas as well. So those I paid special attention to, trying to really understand what's behind the formulas or behind the processes, especially the formulas. If some just didn't make sense to me and I didn't have time to study, I simply memorized them and later made sure that those are the last things I look at right before entering the exam room and the first thing I write down on my dump sheet. I don't regret taking a week off before the exam, by the way. It was a great decision. I spent that week off to look at analytics and improve results on the areas that I had the most problems with, and to rest and sleep, of course. So I was absolutely calm on the exam, even though I knew I don't know everything perfectly, but I knew exactly what to expect. I still felt that I'm likely to fail. I just prepped myself to it by making agreement with myself that the goal here today is to simply do my best. I passed the exam from the first attempt. It took me all 4 hours to complete the questions because I took time, to take break and stretch a little, as it's not very healthy to sit that long, especially when you're that pregnant. Some say that if you are not sure about an answer to a question, just pick one. It will increase your chances. I agree with that, but only partially, because PMP exam app allows you to mark questions that you are not sure about or skip questions that you don't want to answer. And Exam Simulator that I used, it also had that feature. So the strategy I had was to skip what I don't know and mark what I'm not 100% sure about and deal with all that at the end. So after I answered everything and skipped the things I didn't know, I had about 40 minutes left, and I took another 5-minute break to clear my mind a little by stretching and walking, and returned back with a bit more fresh mind to take another look to what's marked or skipped. I noticed that for some questions that I marked unsure, I changed the answer, as now it was simply more clear to me what they are expecting. I was also able to figure out some questions that I skipped before. At the very end, when I only had 10 minutes left, I just selected randomly out of the closest answers to whatever skipped questions I had left and made sure that none left without answers. And that's it. The screen showed that I not only passed the exam, but I actually did great on most of the knowledge areas except for closure, which was a surprise for me. Now when I access my PMI profile, I can get back and see my result and learn what are the things that I need to improve, which is pretty cool. I hope I answered your questions, but if not, feel free to leave them in comment section below. Check out this other video about what are the PMP benefits. Do you even need a PMP? This is it for today. To support this channel, please hit the like button below and consider subscribing, as I'm prepping some cool videos on PMBOK. And not only, thank you for watching and have a wonderful day, night, wherever you are.